I was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from emergency surgery, when my mother called. She forgot to hang up. For 20 minutes, I listened to her and my brothers laugh about my desperate need for approval and call me their pathetic cash machine. They thought I was their permanent bank. They were wrong. This is where the mask finally slips, and you won't want to miss how I turn their greed against them. Make sure you're subscribed to see the fallout. We're always curious. Have you ever overheard something you wish you hadn't? Let us know in the comments. The IV drip was cold. That was the only thing I could focus on, the steady, icy trickle of saline moving into the vein of my left hand. The hospital room was dim, illuminated only by the harsh, artificial glow of the monitors and the gray afternoon light filtering through the blinds. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that comes not just from surgery, but from years of running on adrenaline and caffeine. I had been admitted 2 days prior for an emergency appendectomy. It wasn't life-threatening, thankfully, but the complications had been painful. My body had finally forced me to stop, to lie down, to breathe. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. The screen lit up with a picture of my mother, Joyce. She was smiling in the photo, a picture I had taken of her on a vacation to Italy that I had fully paid for 3 years ago. I cleared my throat, trying to sound less groggy than I felt. "Hello, Mom." "Isabella, oh, thank goodness." Her voice was shrill, piercing through my headache. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. Where have you been? Lucas is frantic." "I'm in the hospital, Mom," I said, my voice rasping. "I texted you yesterday. I had surgery." There was a pause, a beat of silence that lasted just a second too long. "Oh, right, the stomach thing," she said dismissively. "Well, are you out yet? Because Lucas has a situation with the venue for the engagement party. The deposit didn't go through. The card was declined, Isabella, declined." She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't ask if I was in pain. She asked about the credit card. I might have hit my limit with the hospital intake fees," I murmured, closing my eyes. "I can transfer funds later, but I'm really tired right now, Mom." "Well, fix it as soon as you can," she snapped, her tone shifting to that familiar, guilt-inducing edge. "You know how stressed your brother is. Christopher is there with him now, and they're both worried sick that you're going to ruin this for the family. Just handle it, Isabella. We're counting on you." "I will," I whispered. "I have to go, the nurse is coming in." "Fine, bye." I heard the beep that signaled she had pulled the phone away from her ear. I moved my thumb to press the red end call button, but my hand was shaking from the medication and the fatigue. I missed the button. The phone slipped from my fingers and landed face up on the sheets. Before I could pick it up, I heard voices coming from the tiny speaker. "She says she's tired," my mother's voice came through, clear as day. She hadn't hung up. She had just put the phone down, presumably on the table where she was sitting. "She's always tired," a male voice sneered. That was Lucas. My older brother, the visionary entrepreneur who hadn't held a steady job in 6 years. It's her only personality trait. "Oh, look at me, I work so hard, I'm such a martyr." My heart stopped. I froze, staring at the phone. I knew I should hang up. I knew that listening would only hurt me. But I couldn't move. "Did she transfer the money?" Another voice asked. Christopher, my younger brother, the 29-year-old musician, who is currently living in the basement of the house I paid the mortgage on. "She says she will," Joyce replied, and I could hear the sound of silverware clinking against a plate. They were eating lunch. "She's in the hospital, probably dragging it out for sympathy." "God, she is so pathetic," Lucas laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "She literally thinks that if she buys us stuff, we'll actually want to hang out with her. It's sad, really." "It's not sad, it's convenient," Christopher chimed in, his mouth full. "As long as the pathetic cash machine keeps spitting out 20s, I don't care how much she complains about being tired." "Hey, Mom, did you ask her about my car insurance? It's due next week." "I'll ask her once the wedding deposit clears," Joyce said soothingly. "We have to pace these things, Christopher. You can't spook the cow while you're milking it." The room spun. The nausea from the anesthesia came rushing back, but this time it was mixed with a cold, hard shock. "She's 35 and alone," Lucas mocked. "She has nobody but us. That's why she pays. She's terrified we'll leave her. And honestly, we should charge a premium for dealing with her boring stories. Just make sure she pays for the honeymoon before you." "Cut her off, Lucas," Joyce chuckled. "We need that trip to Bali." "Don't worry, Mom," Lucas said. "I've got her wrapped around my finger. She's desperate to be the good sister. It's actually embarrassing how easy it is." I reached out, my hand trembling violently, and pressed the red button. The voices cut off instantly. The silence that filled the room was deafening. I stared at the white ceiling tiles, counting the little dots until they blurred together. Tears didn't come. I expected them to, but they didn't. Instead, a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips, replacing the pain of the surgery. They didn't love me. They didn't even like me. I was an ATM with a pulse. The betrayal wasn't just in the words, it was in the casualness of it. They weren't arguing, they were laughing. They were eating lunch and discussing my exploitation as if they were discussing the weather. It was the ease of their cruelty that broke something fundamental inside me. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. I lay in that hospital bed for another 4 hours, staring at the blank television screen mounted on the wall. The nurse came in to check my vitals, commenting on how my heart rate had spiked. She asked if I was in pain. "Yes," I said, my voice hollow, "but not from the surgery." She looked confused, adjusted my drip, and left. I didn't call them back. I didn't text Lucas to say the transfer was done. For the first time in 15 years, I simply did nothing. My mind began to replay every interaction we'd had over the last decade. The signs were there. They had always been there, painted in neon lights that I had willfully ignored. I thought about the Christmas when Christopher forgot to get me a gift, but happily accepted the vintage guitar I bought him. I thought about the time Joyce cried because I wouldn't fund her kitchen renovation, telling me I was abandoning the family home, until I caved and wrote the check. I thought about Lucas, who called me selfish whenever I tried to take a vacation, claiming I should be using that money to invest in his latest doomed startup. I had framed it all as love. I told myself they were just struggling, that they were passionate, that families helped each other. I had built a narrative where I was the responsible, caring provider who held the clan together. But the narrative was a lie. I wasn't the provider, I was the mark. My phone buzzed again, a text from Lucas. "Lucas, hey sis, just checked the account. Still nothing. The venue manager is getting antsy. Don't embarrass me, send it ASAP. No, get well soon. No, how is the recovery? Just a demand and a threat of social shame." I typed out a reply, my fingers hovering over the keys. "I heard you." I stared at those 3 words. If I sent them, the explosion would be immediate. They would gaslight me, tell me I was hallucinating from the drugs, tell me I misunderstood. They would spin it until I was the villain for eavesdropping. I backspaced, deleting the words one by one. No, I thought, that's too easy. If I confronted them now, they would panic. They would scramble to cover their tracks, apologize profusely, and then, once I was placated, they would go right back to using me, just more carefully this time. I needed a different approach. I needed to see exactly how deep the rot went. "I'm having trouble with the banking app," I typed instead. "Hospital Wi-Fi is spotty. I'll call the bank in the morning, don't worry." Lucas, fine, just make sure it's done by noon. Love you. I love you. Those 2 words looked like venom on the screen. The next day, I was discharged. Joyce didn't come to pick me up. She said her sciatica was acting up, and Lucas was too busy with wedding prep. I took an Uber home to my empty apartment. My apartment was quiet, clean, and peaceful. It was the only thing I owned that they hadn't touched, mostly because I kept the spare key hidden. But the house they lived in, the sprawling 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs, that was a different story. I sat down at my desk, still wearing my comfortable sweatpants, and opened my laptop. I logged into my primary bank account, then the joint account I shared with my mother for emergencies, then the credit card account I had given Lucas as an authorized user for business expenses. I pulled up the last 3 years of statements. It was staggering. Grocery bills for hundreds of dollars at high-end organic markets, liquor store runs, a charge for a business retreat that was clearly a resort in Cabo, Christopher's tuition, which I knew about, but also charges for textbooks that were conveniently the exact price of a new gaming console. They were bleeding me dry. I opened a spreadsheet. I'm a marketing director, data is my life. I started entering the numbers. Every loan I was promised would be paid back, every emergency transfer, every bill. As the total climbed, a cold resolve settled in my stomach. It replaced the nausea. It replaced the heartbreak. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was weak. They mocked my loneliness, using it as leverage to keep me paying. But in their arrogance, they had forgotten one crucial thing. I looked at the file folder on my shelf, the one labeled Estate and Assets. They had forgotten that while they lived in the house, drove the cars, and swiped the cards, my name was the only one on the deeds and the titles. I wasn't just the cash machine. I was the owner of their entire world. To understand why I let it go on for this long, you have to understand the dynamic Joyce cultivated. Since our father left when I was 7, Joyce had drilled one motto into our heads: it's us against the world. But as we got older, us started to mean Isabella supporting everyone. I was the studious one. The one who got the scholarship, worked 3 jobs through college, and climbed the corporate ladder with bloody fingernails. I missed parties, I missed dates, I missed life, all to ensure I had the stability Joyce claimed we desperately needed. Lucas, 3 years my senior, was the golden child. He was charming, handsome, and utterly incompetent. He had big ideas. He was going to revolutionize the coffee industry, then the crypto market, then the vintage sneaker game. Joyce encouraged every whim, telling me, "Your brother is a genius, Isabella. He just needs seed money. When he makes it big, he'll take care of all of us." He never made it big. He just made debt. Debt that I paid off quietly so Mom wouldn't worry. Then there was Christopher, the baby. At 29, he was arguably the worst of them. He had watched Lucas fail upwards and decided he didn't even want to try. He floated from community college courses to part-time barista gigs, spending most of his time in the basement studio I had soundproofed for him, recording music that nobody listened to. Joyce was the conductor of this symphony of leeching. She was a master of the emotional pivot. If I tried to set a boundary, she would clutch her chest, talk about her blood pressure, and remind me of how she gave up everything to raise us alone. "You're the strong one, Isabella," she would say, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Your brothers, they're sensitive, they need help. You don't want to see them on the street, do you? You don't want to break my heart." And I believed her. I believed I was the protector. 2 days after my discharge, I was well enough to attend Sunday dinner. It was a mandatory weekly ritual. I walked into the house, my house, though they treated it like their ancestral estate, and was hit by the smell of roast chicken. "There she is," Lucas boomed, coming out of the living room with a beer in his hand. He looked healthy, tanned, and relaxed. "The patient returns. You look tired, Izzy." "I'm recovering, Lucas," I said, keeping my face neutral. "Did you handle the venue?" he asked, not missing a beat. "I transferred the deposit this morning," I lied. I hadn't transferred a dime. I had moved the money to a high-yield savings account they couldn't access. But the transfer usually took 24 hours to show up or bounce in their eyes. I needed to buy time. "Good," he sighed, taking a swig of beer. "Because Vanessa was freaking out. You know how brides are." Joyce came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Isabella, sit, sit. You shouldn't be standing." She guided me to the recliner, the one with the broken handle that they never fixed. "Christopher, get your sister a water." Christopher emerged from the basement, wearing noise-canceling headphones around his neck. "Sup, sis? Hey, can we talk about the Wi-Fi? It's been lagging lately. I can't stream my sessions. I'll look into it, I said quietly. So, Joyce sat on the sofa opposite me, her eyes gleaming with that specific predatory look she got when she wanted something. Now that the venue is sorted, we need to talk about the rehearsal dinner. Vanessa's parents are suggesting that Italian place downtown, but it's pricey. I told them not to worry, that the groom's family hosts the rehearsal and we do it right. She smiled at me, a smile that used to make me feel warm and needed. Now, all I saw was a shark baring its teeth. How much? I asked. 5,000 should cover it, Lucas said, scrolling through his phone. Plus the open bar, so maybe 7. $7,000, I repeated. It's a tax write-off, isn't it? Christopher laughed, flopping onto the couch. Just put it under marketing or whatever you do. That's not how tax fraud works, Christopher, I said dryly. Don't be negative, Isabella, Joyce chided. This is your brother's big day. We want to show Vanessa's family that we are people of substance. People of substance? They were people of my substance. I'll see what I can do, I said. That's my girl, Joyce beamed. Oh, and speaking of substance, I met a lovely man at the club yesterday. Her son is a chiropractor, divorced but very wealthy. I showed her your picture. Mom, please, I said, a wave of exhaustion hitting me. I'm just trying to help, she exclaimed, throwing her hands up. You can't be alone forever, Isabella. Who's going to take care of you when you're old? You need a husband. You mean you need another income stream, I thought. Actually, I said, sitting up straighter. The pain in my abdomen flared, but I ignored it. I wanted to talk to you guys about something. Since I've been sick, I've been thinking about my finances. The room went still. The air pressure dropped noticeably. What about them? Lucas asked, his eyes narrowing. I'm just realized I need to be more organized, I said, forcing a weak smile. I'm thinking of hiring a financial planner just to look over everything, make sure we're all set for the future. Joyce's face paled slightly. A financial planner? Why? We're doing fine. You handle everything so well. Strangers don't need to know our business, Isabella. You know how I feel about privacy. It's just a thought, I shrugged. But they might want to see receipts for the business expenses and the house upkeep. Lucas exchanged a quick, panicked glance with Christopher. That seems like a waste of money, Lucas said quickly. I can look at the books for you. I'm good with numbers. You're good at spending numbers, Lucas, I said, letting a tiny bit of ice seep into my tone. He bristled. What is that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, standing up. Just a joke, I'm tired. I think I'm going to skip dinner and go home. But I made roast chicken, Joyce protested, standing up. Isabella, you're acting strange. It's the medication, Mom, I said, walking to the door. I just need rest. As I walked to the car, I felt their eyes boring into my back. They were suspicious. Good. Suspicion would make them sloppy. They didn't know it yet, but the financial planner wasn't a planner at all. I had an appointment the next morning with a forensic accountant and a real estate attorney. I wasn't just going to cut them off. I was going to present them with an invoice for every single penny they had stolen, squandered, and swindled. And if they couldn't pay, well, eviction notices are free to print. The office of Mr. Henderson, a forensic accountant recommended by a colleague, smelled of stale coffee and old paper. It was a stark contrast to the sterile hospital room, but the nausea I felt was exactly the same. Isabella, Mr. Henderson said, adjusting his spectacles and sliding a thick binder across the mahogany desk toward me. I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen corporate embezzlement, divorce fraud, and elder abuse. But this, he paused, tapping the binder with a manicured finger. This is highly sophisticated for a family arrangement. I opened the binder. The first page was a summary graph. A red line tracked my income, and a jagged blue line tracked the withdrawals and expenses attributed to my mother and brothers. The blue line was devouring the red one. Walk me through it, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were clammy. Let's start with the business loans for your brother Lucas, Henderson began, flipping to a tab marked Ventures. You authorized a line of credit for his startup, EcoBrew, 2 years ago, limit of $10,000. Yes, it failed. I paid it off. You paid off the interest, Henderson corrected gently. The principal was refinanced. Lucas used your personal information, specifically the power of attorney you granted your mother for medical emergencies, to extend the line of credit. It's currently sitting at $45,000. The air left my lungs. 45,000. And looking at the transaction history, he continued, relentless, it wasn't spent on coffee beans or roasting equipment. It was spent on luxury car rentals, online gambling, and, well, a significant amount at a venue called the Velvet Lounge. I felt sick, and Christopher is less ambitious but more frequent, Henderson noted. You pay the utilities for the family home, correct? The electric bill averages $600 a month. Ideally less, but yes, it's a big house. It's a big house, but it's not running a server farm, Henderson said. I cross-referenced the usage. Christopher is mining cryptocurrency in the basement. He's using the electricity you pay for to generate digital currency that goes into a wallet solely in his name. You are effectively paying him to print money for himself. I closed my eyes. It wasn't just laziness. It wasn't just incompetence. It was theft. Calculated, deliberate theft. And finally, Henderson said, his voice dropping an octave, the mortgage. I pay it directly, I said quickly. That one I know is safe. You pay the mortgage, he agreed. But did you know there is a second lien on the property? I froze. What? 6 months ago, a home equity line of credit was taken out against the house. $30,000. The paperwork claims it was for emergency roof repairs. I checked the permits in your town. No roof work was ever filed or completed. Who signed for it? I whispered, though I already knew. You did, Henderson said. He slid a photocopy of a document toward me. Or rather, someone who practiced your signature very carefully did. I looked at the signature. It was a good forgery, slightly loopier on the L than I usually wrote, but close enough to pass a casual inspection. That's Joyce's handwriting, I said, the realization settling like a stone in my gut. She taught me how to write in cursive. That's her L. This crosses the line from mooching into felony fraud, Isabella, Henderson said, leaning back. You have enough here to send them to prison, certainly enough to sue them into oblivion. I don't want to send them to prison, I said, staring at the forgery. I just want them out of my life, and I want my house back. Then we need to be strategic, he advised. If you cut them off cold turkey today, they will claim squatters' rights. They will claim you gifted them the funds. They will drag this out in court for years while living in your house on your dime. You need them to admit the debt. You need leverage. I thought about the upcoming engagement party, the people of substance, the image Joyce desperately wanted to project to Vanessa's wealthy parents. I have leverage, I said, a cold plan forming in my mind. They need a check for the wedding, a big one. They're expecting me to hand it over at the engagement dinner next Saturday. Henderson raised an eyebrow. And will you? I'm going to hand them something, I said, closing the binder. But it won't be a check. I spent the next 3 days in a state of hyper-focused rage. I went to work, I led meetings, I smiled at colleagues, but beneath the surface, I was a coiled spring. I needed one final piece of evidence to make my case irrefutable. I needed to know exactly where the roof repair money went. On Wednesday evening, I drove to the family house. I knew Joyce played bridge on Wednesdays and Lucas would be out with Vanessa. Christopher would be home, but he'd be in the basement with his headphones on, oblivious to the world. I let myself in with my key. The house was messy, dishes in the sink, shoes kicked off in the hallway. It was the mess of people who didn't respect their space because they didn't have to pay for it. I went straight to Joyce's office, a small desk in the kitchen nook. Joyce was old school. She didn't trust the cloud. She kept paper records of everything she considered important, usually hidden in a series of floral-patterned boxes she thought looked decorative. I found it in the bottom box, under a stack of old greeting cards. A bank statement for an account I didn't know existed. The account name was J&L Fund, Joyce and Lucas. I scanned the deposits. The $30,000 from the HELOC home equity line of credit was there. And the withdrawals. $5,000 wedding planner, deposit $8,000 Kleinfeld bridal. Deposit for Vanessa's dress, $2,000. Cash withdrawal $10,000 transfer to CryptoKing. They had stolen equity from my house, risking foreclosure if I missed a payment, to pay for Lucas's wedding and Christopher's crypto gambling. They were cannibalizing my future to fund their present. "What are you doing?" I spun around. Lucas was standing in the kitchen doorway. He must have come home early. He looked disheveled, his tie loosened, his face flushed. "I was looking for a stamp," I lied smoothly, sliding the paper into my purse. "I need to mail a bill." "You have your own house, Isabella," Lucas sneered, walking to the fridge and grabbing a beer. "Why are you snooping around here?" "It's my house too, Lucas," I reminded him. "Technically, it's only my house." "Don't start that again," he snapped, slamming the fridge door. "Mom puts more work into this place than you ever do. You just sign checks. It's the least you can do after Dad left." There it was, the ancient guilt trip. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about the wedding budget," I said, leaning against the counter. "I was looking at the venue costs. You asked for $10,000 for the deposit, right?" "Yeah, prices went up. Inflation, Izzy. You wouldn't understand, you don't live in the real world." "I called the venue today," I said calmly. Lucas froze, the beer bottle halfway to his mouth. "You what?" "I called the Grand Oak Manor. I pretended to be your assistant. I asked to confirm the remaining balance." Lucas lowered the bottle slowly. His eyes darted to the side, a tell he'd had since he was a kid. "Why would you do that? You're undermining me." "They told me the total cost for the entire rental is $8,000, I said. "And the deposit was only $2,000. You asked me for $10,000 for the deposit alone." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. "There are other costs," Lucas stammered, his face turning a blotchy red. "Catering, flowers. I was bundling it to make it easier for you. I didn't want to bother you with a dozen little bills." "So you lied," I stated. "I didn't lie, I was managing the funds," he shouted, his voice echoing off the tile floors. "God, you are so petty. You're sitting on a six-figure salary and you're grilling me over a few $1,000s. This is my wedding, Isabella. It's the most important day of my life. Why are you trying to ruin it?" "I'm not trying to ruin it, Lucas. I'm trying to understand why you're treating me like a bank instead of a sister." "Because that's all you're good for," he exploded. The words hung in the air. He didn't take them back. He didn't apologize. He just breathed heavily, staring at me with pure contempt. "You have no friends," he spat, emboldened by his own anger. "You have no boyfriend. You have nothing but your job. We are the only people who tolerate you. So yeah, you pay. It's the tax for having a family." My heart hammered against my ribs, but strangely, I didn't feel like crying. I felt validated. The recording I had heard in the hospital wasn't a fluke. This was who he was. "I see," I said softly. "The tax for having a family." "Yes," he said, taking a swig of his beer. "So just cut the check for the engagement party and stop counting pennies. You're embarrassing yourself." "I'll have the check ready on Saturday," I said. "Don't worry." I walked past him, my purse heavy with the stolen bank statement. As I reached the door, Joyce walked in, carrying grocery bags. "Isabella, staying for dinner?" she asked cheerfully, as if the tension in the room wasn't thick enough to choke on. "No, Mom," I said. "Lucas and I just had a very enlightening conversation. I have to go prepare for the party." "Good, good," she smiled, oblivious. "Make sure you wear something nice. Vanessa's mother is very judgmental." "Oh, I'll make an impression," I promised. "Believe me." The days leading up to the engagement party were a blur of strategic maneuvering. I wasn't just planning a breakup, I was planning a controlled demolition. I instructed my lawyer, Ms. Vance, to draft 3 specific documents. First, a notice to quit, a legal eviction notice giving them 30 days to vacate the premises. Second, a demand letter for the repayment of $75,000, the cumulative total of the fraud I could easily prove, including the HELOC and the credit cards. Third, a sale agreement for the house. I had already contacted a We Buy Homes for Cash investor. I wasn't going to list it. I wanted it gone immediately. But the antagonists weren't sitting idly by. They sensed something was wrong. On Thursday, my phone blew up. Joyce, Isabella, the caterer for the party needs payment today. $4,000. Why is your credit card declining? I had reported the cards as compromised the moment I left the house on Wednesday. I canceled that card. There was fraudulent activity on it. Joyce, what? You can't cancel it now. We have vendors to pay. Use your debit card. Fix this immediately. Lucas, are you insane? Vanessa is crying. Her dress alterations deposit bounced. You are humiliating us. Christopher, yo, my internet is down. Did you forget the bill again? I sat in my office, watching the messages roll in on my screen. I took a sip of my coffee. The fraudulent activity was them, but they didn't know I knew that yet. They thought it was a bank error or me being incompetent. I replied to the group chat I had ignored for years. I'm freezing all accounts until the fraud investigation is complete. The bank says it looks like identity theft. Serious stuff. I can't move any money until Monday. Joyce, Monday? The party is Saturday. Isabella, you're being selfish. Just write a personal check. Bring cash if you have to. Lucas, if you ruin Saturday night, I will never forgive you. Vanessa's dad is going to be there. Do not make us look poor. Do not make us look poor. That was their greatest fear. Not being poor, they were fine with being poor as long as I subsidized the illusion of wealth. Their fear was being exposed as poor. I decided to twist the knife just a little before the final blow. I'm sorry. My hands are tied by the bank, but don't worry about Saturday. I'll bring a special gift to the dinner that will solve all the funding issues for the wedding. I promise. Joyce, thank God. I knew you'd come through. Just make sure it's enough to cover the honeymoon, too. We need to book the flights. I put the phone down. That evening, I went to verify the final piece of the puzzle. I needed to know exactly how deep Vanessa, Lucas's fiancée, was in on the grift. Was she a victim, too, or was she an accomplice? I met Vanessa for a quick coffee under the pretense of discussing a surprise for Lucas. She was a pretty girl, 10Y. Years younger than me. With a taste for designer labels, she definitely couldn't afford on her yoga instructor salary. Ideally, we want the honeymoon in the Maldives, Vanessa chirped, stirring her oat milk latte. Lucas says you have a travel points account with millions of miles. We were thinking first class would be a nice touch. Lucas told you I'd pay for the honeymoon, I asked gently. Well, yeah, she laughed, looking at me like I was dense. He says you're basically sitting on a gold mine and you never spend it. He said you're saving it all for us anyway because you don't have, a life. She covered her mouth, realizing she'd said the quiet part out loud. He said you're very generous to family. He said I don't have a life, I repeated, my expression unmoving. He just meant you work a lot, she backpedaled. Look, Isabella, we really appreciate it. My parents are paying for the reception, but Lucas insisted his side of the family, meaning you handle the extras. The honeymoon, the rehearsal, the house down payment. The house down payment, I asked. Oh, didn't he tell you? Vanessa's eyes widened. He said as a wedding gift, you were going to sign the deed of the colonial over to us. Since it's too big for one person and you have that condo, it's perfect for raising kids. My blood ran cold. They weren't just going to bleed me, they were planning to evict me from my own property. They had already discussed it. They had probably already planned the nursery in my mother's sewing room. I see, I said, standing up. That is quite a plan. So we can count on it, she asked, oblivious to the danger she was in. Oh, absolutely, I smiled. It was the sharpest, coldest smile I had ever worn. Saturday is going to be full of surprises. You won't believe what I'm going to give you. I walked out of the coffee shop. The investigation was over. The verdict was in. They were guilty, all of them. And on Saturday night, in front of Vanessa's wealthy parents, in front of their friends, in front of the entire facade they had built, I was going to execute the sentence. The venue for the engagement dinner was Le Jardin, a French bistro that was aggressively expensive and pretentiously dimly lit. It was exactly the kind of place Joyce thought wealthy people frequented, though in reality, it was mostly filled with people trying to look wealthy. I arrived 10 minutes late. It was a calculated power move, a small disruption to their carefully curated tableau. When I walked in, the table was already seated. Joyce was at the head, holding court in a sequin dress that I knew cost more than my first car. Lucas was to her right, looking dapper in a suit I had bought him for a job interview 3 years ago, a job he never got. Beside him was Vanessa, glittering with excitement, and across from them were her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Westcott. Mr. Westcott looked like a man who did not suffer fools. He was checking his watch when I approached. "Isabella, finally," Joyce trilled, her voice tight. "We were just about to order. Sit, you're at the end." She gestured to a chair at the far end of the table, effectively placing me in the children's seat, away from the adults. "So sorry," I said, offering a polite, razor-thin smile to the Westcotts. "I had to stop at the printers. Business, you know." "Always working," Lucas sighed, rolling his eyes at Mr. Westcott. "My sister is married to her career. It's a bit sad, really, but someone has to keep the lights on, right?" He laughed, nobody else did. Dinner was an exercise in nausea. I watched as Joyce spun a web of lies so intricate it was almost impressive. She told Mrs. Westcott about the family trust, non-existent, her charitable work, also non-existent, and how she was gifting Lucas the down payment for their marital home because family supports family. I ate my escargot silently, my hand resting on the heavy leather tote bag beneath my chair. Inside was the binder, the invoice, the eviction notice. When the dessert course arrived, a towering croquembouche that cost $400, Lucas cleared his throat. "Well," he began, standing up and tapping a spoon against his wine glass, "I just want to thank everyone for being here, especially Robert and Linda," he nodded to the Westcotts, "and my mother, the matriarch who makes it all possible." Joyce dabbed at dry eyes with a napkin. And Lucas turned his gaze to me, his eyes hard and expectant. "My sister, Isabella, who I believe has a special contribution to make to the wedding fund tonight. Isabella." The table fell silent. All eyes turned to me. This was the moment, the shakedown, public pressure to force compliance. I stood up slowly. I picked up my wine glass, took a sip, and set it down. Then I reached into my tote bag. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and projecting to the back of the room. "I do have a contribution. Lucas told me that for Hi's wedding, he didn't want a traditional gift. He wanted financial freedom. He wanted the house. He wanted to start his life with a clean slate." "That's right," Lucas grinned, extending his hand for the check. So, I continued, pulling out the thick, bound document from Mr. Henderson's office. I decided to give him exactly what he asked for, the truth. I didn't hand it to Lucas. I walked around the table and placed the binder directly in front of Mr. Westcott. "What is this?" Lucas asked, his smile faltering. "That," I said, addressing Vanessa's father, "is a forensic accounting report of the last 5 years of my finances. It details exactly how Lucas and Joyce have embezzled $45,000 through credit card fraud, $30,000 through a forged home equity loan on a property they do not own, and thousands more in stolen utilities." The silence in the restaurant was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. "Isabella, what are you doing?" Joyce hissed, her face draining of color. "Sit down, you're drunk." "I haven't finished," I said, pulling 3 envelopes from my bag. I tossed the first one to Lucas. "That is a civil demand letter for the repayment of $75,000. If a payment plan isn't established within 48 hours, I will be filing a police report for identity theft and fraud." I tossed the second one to Joyce. "That is a notice to quit. You have 30 days to vacate my property. The locks will be changed on the 31st. "Your property?" Mrs. Westcott gasped, looking at Joyce. "I thought you said it was the family estate." "It is," Joyce shrieked, standing up. "She's lying, she's mentally unstable. She just holds the deed for tax purposes." "I bought the house 10 years ago," I said calmly. "I pay the mortgage, I pay the taxes, and as of yesterday," I pulled out the final document. "I have signed a sale agreement with an investment firm. The house is sold. You're not just evicted, the house is gone." Lucas looked at the binder in front of Mr. Westcott, then at Vanessa. Vanessa was staring at him with horror. "You said you own the house," Vanessa whispered. "You said she was just the help." "She is," Lucas shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "She's nothing. She's a jealous, lonely spinster who can't stand to see me happy. This is all fake. She typed this up to ruin me." "Mr. Westcott," I said, ignoring my brother. "If you turn to page 14, you'll see the transaction history where Lucas used the wedding fund, money he likely asked you for, to pay for online gambling debts under the username CryptoKing." Mr. Westcott flipped the page. He adjusted his glasses. He read the line item. His face went purple. "Robert," Mrs. Westcott said, clutching her pearls. Mr. Westcott stood up. He didn't look at Lucas, he looked at his daughter. "Vanessa, get your purse. We are leaving." "No, Robert, wait," Joyce pleaded, grabbing his arm. "She's lying, she's sick." Mr. Westcott shook her off with a look of pure disgust. "I know a bank statement when I see one, madam, and I know a con artist when I smell one. Come, Vanessa." Vanessa stood up. She took off the engagement ring, a ring I knew Lucas had charged to my emergency card, and dropped it into the creme brulee. "You're pathetic," she said to Lucas. "Vanessa, baby, wait." Lucas scrambled after her, knocking over his chair. "She's crazy, I can explain." But they were already walking out the door. I stood there, alone at the table with Joyce and Christopher, who was still eating his steak, looking confused. Joyce slowly sank into her chair. She looked small, old. The grandeur was gone, stripped away to reveal the bitter, greedy woman underneath. "How could you?" she whispered, trembling. "We are your family. You humiliated us." "No, Mom," I said, picking up my purse. "I just stopped paying for the costumes." I looked at the waiter, who was hovering nervously nearby. "Check for one, please," I said. "I'll be paying for my meal, the rest of the party. They can handle their own bills. They are people of substance, after all." I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. My legs were shaking, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't tired. I felt light. I felt weightless. The fallout was nuclear, just as I expected. I didn't go back to my apartment that night. I checked into a hotel, a nice one with a spa and room service, and turned my phone off. When I turned it back on 2 days later, I had 43 voicemails and over 100 text messages. The threats ranged from legal action, hilarious, considering they had no money for lawyers, to emotional blackmail. "I'm having chest pains, I hope you're happy." But I didn't listen to them. I forwarded everything directly to Ms. Vance, my attorney. I didn't see them on moving day. I hired a security team to oversee the eviction. According to the report, it was ugly. Joyce screamed at the movers. Lucas tried to take the appliances, which were legally fixtures of the house. Christopher just cried because he didn't know how to move his soundproofing foam. But they left. They had no choice. The We Buy Homes investors were not the sentimental type. They wanted the property vacant, and they had the legal muscle to ensure it was. The consequences for my family were swift and severe. Without my income, the house of cards collapsed instantly. Lucas attempted to sue me for emotional distress, but the case was thrown out before it even reached a judge. The evidence of his fraud was too overwhelming. Faced with the police report I filed regarding the identity theft, he took a plea deal to avoid jail time. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation and mandatory restitution. He now works at a car rental agency. Ironically, the same one where he used to rent luxury cars on my dime. Vanessa never spoke to him again. I heard through the grapevine that she sold her story to a local blog, painting herself as the victim of a sociopathic family. She wasn't wrong. Joyce moved into a 1-bedroom, subsidized apartment 3 towns over. She sends me letters sometimes. They usually start with, "I forgive you," and end with a request for money for medication or groceries. I don't open them. I mark them, "Return to sender." It's not cruelty, it's survival. I know that if I give an inch, they will take a mile. Christopher was the only one who somewhat landed on his feet. Forced to actually work to eat, he got a job at a music store. He's not famous, but he pays his own rent. He sent me an email 6 months ago. It just said, "It sucked, but I guess I needed the wake-up call. Sorry." I didn't reply. I'm not ready for that. Maybe I never will be. As for me, I sold my condo. I wanted a fresh start, away from the memories of them banging on my door or showing up unannounced. I bought a small, mid-century modern house with a view of the river. It has a beautiful kitchen that I actually cook in, now that I'm not working 80 hours a week to support 4 adults. I sat on my new deck yesterday evening, watching the sunset reflect off the water. I had a glass of wine in one hand and a book in the other. My phone was inside, silent. For years, they called me their pathetic cash machine. They thought my value was measured only in what I could provide for them. They thought my loneliness was a weakness they could exploit. But they were wrong. My loneliness was my cocoon. In the silence of my own life, I learned to be self-sufficient. I learned to be strong. And when the time came, I learned that the only person I needed to save was myself. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet, crisp air of freedom. I am not a cash machine. I am Isabella. And for the first time in 35 years, my life belongs entirely to me.